My name is Brooke Walker. I am 34 years old and a successful real estate attorney in Boston. Last month, I went back to my hometown for what I thought would be a normal family dinner. It was at my sister Jessica's luxurious estate. Instead, it turned into the night that shattered and rebuilt my entire life. Walking into her marble-floored entryway, I felt that familiar warmth of family. It was mixed with the constant feeling of not quite belonging. I never expected my sister to publicly humiliate me at her dinner table. I never expected to finally stand up for myself after decades of mistreatment. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family's ultimate betrayal, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Subscribe if you want to see more stories about finding strength when you're least expecting it. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. Appearances mattered more than reality. Our family home was modest but well kept. My parents, Thomas and Marie Walker, worked hard to maintain a facade of a perfect suburban life. From the beginning, there was a clear order in our household. Jessica, my sister, who is 6 years older, was the sun around which our family revolved. I was merely a distant moon, noticed only when it was convenient. My father worked as a bank manager. My mother was an elementary school administrator. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. The money they did have often went toward Jessica's desires. Dance lessons, private tutoring, designer clothes. Nothing was too expensive for their golden child. Meanwhile, I wore hand-me-downs and joined free after-school programs. Despite the obvious favoritism, I tried desperately to earn my place in the family through school. Jessica was pretty and popular, but she was an average student. I excelled in my studies. By 3rd grade, I was reading at a high school level. By 8th grade, I was taking advanced placement courses. My report cards were filled with A's. My weekends were spent at debate tournaments and academic competitions. None of it seemed to matter. My parents would go to Jessica's mediocre ballet recital with flowers and cameras. Then they would forget about my honor society induction ceremony completely. The pattern was clear. Jessica was destined for greatness in their eyes simply by existing. I had to fight for every scrap of acknowledgement. Jessica just has that special something, my mother would say whenever I questioned the difference. Some people shine naturally. The idea that I didn't shine stung deeply. But it also fueled my determination to prove myself. When Jessica married Alan Thompson, a wealthy real estate developer, at 24, my parents treated it like a royal wedding. They spent their entire savings on the elaborate ceremony. They beamed with pride as their daughter secured her place in high society. I was in my first year of law school then, working 2 jobs to pay my tuition. They asked if I could contribute to the wedding fund. The years that followed only widened the gap between us. Jessica became a trophy wife. She lived in a mansion in the suburbs. She hosted dinner parties for Alan's business associates. She eventually gave birth to twins, Tyler and Sophia. My parents practically moved into their guest house for 6 months after the twins were born. They helped with every diaper change and midnight feeding. Meanwhile, I struggled through law school. I graduated with honors. I began the grueling process of making a name for myself in a competitive field. I specialized in real estate law. Partly because I was good at it, and partly because of some subconscious desire to understand the world that had accepted my sister so easily. For 10 years, I worked 80-hour weeks. I took every case I could get. I built my reputation, one victory at a time. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Jessica married into real estate wealth, I was becoming an expert in the legal rules that protected that wealth. It was as if I was circling the fortress that had welcomed her but kept me out. Contact with my family shrank to holiday phone calls and occasional emails. Each time, I would hear endless stories about Jessica's perfect children, her community volunteering, and her husband's latest business success. My achievements were met with polite disinterest, if they were mentioned at all. Then, 3 weeks ago, I won a landmark case against a major development company. It had been swindling elderly homeowners out of their properties. The case made headlines in industry publications. Suddenly, my phone was ringing with calls from prestigious firms offering partnerships. After a decade of hard work, I had finally arrived. The call from Jessica came the next day. "Brooke, I saw your name in Alan's business journal. Something about a big case. We should celebrate. Come to dinner on Saturday. The invitation stunned me. For the first time, there was something like pride in her voice when she spoke about me. After all these years of seeking their approval, could this finally be my moment of acceptance? I spent $200 on a bottle of wine to bring as a gift. I bought a new outfit. I had my hair styled. I even splurged on a professional manicure. It's pathetic in retrospect how eagerly I jumped at the chance for family validation. The drive to Jessica's mansion in the wealthiest suburb of Portland filled me with nervous excitement. Her home was a sprawling Tudor-style estate with manicured gardens and a circular driveway. As I parked my sensible sedan among the luxury vehicles, I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and told myself that tonight would be different. My parents greeted me at the door with brief hugs. My mother commented that I had finally done something with my hair. My father asked if the car outside was a rental. Jessica appeared behind them. She was elegant in designer loungewear. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Brooke, you made it. Come in. Alan's just opening wine." I handed her the expensive bottle I had brought. I watched as she glanced at the label without comment and handed it to a hovering housekeeper. "We'll save this for another time," she said dismissively. Alan's already selected a vintage for tonight. Despite this initial coolness, the first hour went reasonably well. We sat in her sunroom, and I answered questions about my case. My father seemed genuinely impressed by some of the legal strategies I described. Even Jessica asked thoughtful questions about the impact on industry practices. For the first time in my life, I felt like they were seeing me. They saw the real me, the accomplished professional I had become. It was a powerful feeling. It lowered my guard just enough for me to miss what was really happening. The dinner itself started pleasantly enough. Jessica's dining room was straight out of an architectural magazine. It had a crystal chandelier, hand-painted wallpaper, and an antique mahogany table that could seat 16. But it was set for just the 6 of us: my parents, Jessica and Alan, and me. The twins, now 10 years old, joined us for dinner. I hadn't seen them in over 2 years. They had grown from chubby toddlers into miniature versions of their parents. Sophia had Jessica's perfectly styled blonde hair and practiced smile. Tyler had his father's calculating eyes and rigid posture. "Aunt Brooke works with buildings like Daddy," Jessica explained to them as we took our seats. "Not exactly," I corrected gently. "I'm an attorney who specializes in real estate law. I protect people's rights to their property." Alan cleared his throat. "Actually, Brooke just causes problems for legitimate business transactions. Makes everything take twice as long." There was an awkward pause before everyone except me laughed. "Always the rule follower," Jessica said, serving the salad. "Remember how she used to tattle on me for breaking curfew, Mom? She was always so serious." My mother agreed. "We worried she'd never have any fun." "Well, her seriousness has finally paid off," my father said, raising his glass slightly. "That big case must have come with a nice paycheck." "Nothing compared to what Alan makes in a month," Jessica interjected quickly, patting her husband's hand. And just like that, the brief acknowledgement of my success was diminished and dismissed. Throughout the first course, Jessica peppered me with questions that seemed innocent but carried subtle jabs. "Still single, Brooke? I know a few divorced men from Alan's golf club I could introduce you to. That outfit is nice. Is that what female attorneys wear these days? So masculine. Your apartment must feel so cozy. I can't imagine living in such a small space again." Each comment landed like a tiny paper cut. Individually, they were insignificant, but together, they were painful. My parents nodded along. They occasionally added their own observations about my life choices. "We always hoped Brooke would find a nice man and settle down." My mother sighed. "Career women often regret not focusing on family sooner. Not everyone can be lucky enough to find their Alan," Jessica replied, smiling at her husband. I noticed something odd during these exchanges. While Jessica spoke to me, her eyes frequently darted to our parents as if checking their reactions. Several times, I caught her and Alan exchanging meaningful glances. The twins, perhaps copying their parents' behavior, began their own campaign of subtle nastiness. Sophia, accidentally, spilled water near my plate twice. Tyler asked loudly why I didn't have any children of my own. Some women just aren't meant to be mothers, Jessica told him, loud enough for everyone to hear. As the main course was served, I excused myself to use the restroom. I needed a moment alone to compose myself. On my way back, I passed Alan's home office. I could hear him speaking in hushed but urgent tones on the phone. Yes, tonight. She has no idea. Jessica's handling it. He saw me in the doorway and abruptly ended the call. Enjoying dinner, Brooke? He asked, his smile tight. It's lovely, I lied. Jessica's always been a wonderful hostess. He nodded, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, your case against Riverfront Development was impressive. You're quite the formidable opponent when you choose to be. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. Back at the table, I noticed Jessica whispering something to our mother, who glanced at me and nodded. My father was unusually quiet. He was focusing intently on cutting his steak into precise pieces. The strange behavior continued throughout the meal. Twice, I caught bits of whispered conversations. After dessert, the papers? Finally getting rid of her claim? Grandmother would have agreed eventually. At the mention of my grandmother, memories flooded back. My father's mother had been the one person in the family who seemed to truly see me. While my parents doted on Jessica, Grandma Elizabeth spent time with me. She encouraged my academic pursuits and told me I was destined for important things. The last time I saw her before she passed away 5 years ago, she had pulled me aside at a family gathering. Don't let them diminish you, Brooke, she had said, her once strong voice frail but determined. You have more strength than all of them combined. I was pulled from this memory by Jessica's announcement. She said she had wonderful news to share, but wanted to wait until after dessert. The way she looked at me when she said it, a mixture of triumph and anticipation, sent a chill down my spine. As dessert was being served, an elaborate tiramisu that Jessica made sure to mention she had prepared herself, my anxiety reached a breaking point. Something was very wrong here. This dinner wasn't a celebration of my success. It was something else entirely. I remembered another incident from my childhood. I was 14 and had won a prestigious scholarship to a summer program at Stanford University. Somehow, the acceptance letter had disappeared from the mail. By the time I called to follow up, the spot had been given to another student. Years later, I discovered that Jessica had hidden the letter because she was jealous of the attention it might bring me. Now, watching her whisper to our parents and exchange knowing looks with Alan, I felt the same sense of impending betrayal. So, Brooke, Jessica said, setting down her dessert fork with theatrical precision. Before I share our big news, I thought it might be nice to look at some old family photos. She nodded to Tyler, who ran from the room and returned with several leather-bound albums. Jessica opened one to a specific page and pushed it toward me. It showed our grandmother's farm, 20 acres of prime land just outside the city limits, with a small but charming farmhouse where we had spent summers as children. Remember how much we loved Grandma's place? Jessica asked, her voice suddenly syrupy with nostalgia. I nodded cautiously. Of course. Those were wonderful summers. Such a shame what's happening to that beautiful property now. My father interjected, shaking his head sadly. What do you mean? I asked. Last I checked, the property was being maintained according to the trust Grandma established. A strange smile spread across Jessica's face. Well, that's actually what we wanted to talk to you about tonight. Jessica continued flipping through the photo album. She lingered on images of our grandmother's farm. There were pictures of the apple orchard in bloom, the small creek that ran along the eastern edge, and the weathered red barn that had stood for over a century. Grandma loved that place so much, Jessica said, her voice dripping with false emotion. She would be heartbroken to see it sitting empty. Wouldn't she, Mom? My mother nodded solemnly. Elizabeth always wanted the farm to benefit the family, to be put to good use. Something in their tone made my stomach tighten. The trust specifies that the farm remains untouched for 10 years after her death, I said carefully. That was Grandma's explicit wish. Alan cleared his throat. About that trust, there have been some developments. Jessica closed the photo album and folded her hands on top of it. Brooke, we know Grandma told you she was leaving the farm to you. But we've been discussing it as a family, and we've come to realize she wasn't in her right mind when she made that promise. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What are you talking about? Grandma was perfectly clear-headed until the end, and she didn't just tell me, she put it in her will and established the trust. And my father shook his head. Elizabeth was showing signs of confusion in those last months. The doctors confirmed it. We simply didn't want to upset you by mentioning it. What doctors? I asked. I spoke with her physician regularly. He never mentioned any cognitive issues. A specialist. My mother chimed in vaguely. Very respected in his field. Jessica leaned forward. She adopted an expression of sympathetic concern that didn't reach her eyes. The point is, Brooke, Grandma wasn't capable of making sound decisions about her estate. Dad, Mom, and I have been working with Alan's attorneys to correct this unfortunate situation. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. The strange behavior, the whispered conversations, the calculated dinner invitation after years of minimal contact. You're challenging Grandma's will, I stated flatly. That's what this dinner is really about. Jessica had the audacity to look offended. This dinner is about family coming together to make things right. The farm should benefit all of us, not just you. Benefit all of us, you mean sell it to developers? I asked, remembering Alan's business connections. Alan spoke up, his businessman persona fully engaged. We've had several very generous offers for the land. The location is prime for a new luxury housing development. The money would be split between all family members. Of course, after administrative fees and development consultations. I noted, looking pointedly at Alan, which I assume your company would provide. He didn't deny it. We've already filed the paperwork to contest the will, my father said. Jessica's been handling the details for months now. The hearing is next week. Months. They had been plotting this for months without saying a word to me. I thought back to my grandmother's last days, how she had called me to her bedside, gripping my hand with surprising strength. The farm is yours, Brooke, she had whispered. Not to sell, but to keep. To have something that's just yours, something no one can take away. She knew. Somehow, she had anticipated this very scenario. Grandma wanted the farm preserved, I said quietly. That's why she'd put it in a trust with specific conditions. She loved that land. She didn't want it carved up into cookie-cutter luxury homes. Jessica rolled her eyes. That's so impractical. The property taxes alone are ridiculous. And for what? Empty fields and a falling down house. It's not falling down, I countered. I've been maintaining it according to the trust requirements, with trust funds that could be better used elsewhere. Alan interjected. I looked around the table at my family. My parents, who had always prioritized Jessica, were now actively helping her steal my inheritance. Jessica, who had everything, the wealthy husband, the beautiful children, the mansion, still wanted the one thing that had been specifically left to me. And Alan, who saw dollar signs where I saw precious memories. You can't do this, I said, my attorney's mind beginning to calculate legal strategies. The will is ironclad. I helped Grandma draft it myself. Jessica's smile turned cold. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? You, the lawyer, helping a confused old woman write a will that mysteriously benefits you above everyone else. The judge will find that very interesting. Are you accusing me of manipulating Grandma? I asked incredulously. If the shoe fits, Jessica replied with a shrug. My father, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. We're not saying you did anything wrong intentionally, Brooke. Just that your legal knowledge might have inadvertently influenced Elizabeth's decisions. This is absurd, I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Grandma was evaluated by 2 separate physicians before signing the will, specifically to prevent these kinds of challenges. Her wishes were clear and legally documented. Documents can be contested, Alan said smoothly, especially when there's evidence of undue influence. What evidence? I demanded. Jessica exchanged a look with Alan before responding. We have statements from caregivers who witnessed you discussing the will with Grandma privately multiple times. Because she asked me to. She wanted to ensure everything was in order. It doesn't look good, Brooke. My mother said quietly. A lawyer granddaughter coaching an elderly woman on her will. Then becoming the primary beneficiary. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were twisting my genuine desire to help Grandma into something sinister. The farm was Grandma's security, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She wanted it to be mine. She told all of you that multiple times over the years. Jessica waved her hand dismissively. People say all sorts of things. Legally, what matters is what can be proven in court. And we have a very strong case for having the will invalidated. I looked at my parents, searching for any sign of doubt or remorse. There was none. They were fully committed to Jessica's scheme. Why are you doing this? I asked them directly. You've always given Jessica everything she wanted. Why help her take the one thing Grandma wanted me to have? My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. It's not about taking anything from you, Brooke. It's about doing what's best for the entire family. And Jessica's family needs it more. My mother added. With 2 children to put through college eventually, and all their activities. Needs it more. I echoed in disbelief. Jessica lives in a mansion. Her husband is a millionaire. Don't be dramatic. Jessica snapped. We have expenses you couldn't possibly understand. Private school tuition, country club memberships, summer homes. Those aren't needs, Jessica. Those are luxuries. Alan stepped in, his tone condescending. The point is, Brooke, the farm sitting empty benefits no one. Developed properly, it could provide financial security for generations of our family. It's not sitting empty. I insisted. I go there regularly. I maintain it. I honor Grandma's memory by preserving what she loved. Sentiment doesn't pay property taxes, Jessica said coldly. Face reality, Brooke. The farm is going to be developed. The only question is whether you'll fight us and drain the estate with legal fees, or accept the inevitable gracefully. I looked at each of their faces. These people who were supposed to be my family. I saw nothing but greed and calculation. The betrayal cut deep, but it also cleared away any lingering illusions I had about my place in this family. I won't let you do this, I said firmly. I'm an attorney who specializes in property law. I know my rights. And I know what Grandma wanted. Jessica's face hardened. We thought you might be difficult about this. The tension in the dining room had reached unbearable levels. Jessica's children had been sent upstairs at some point during our argument. But I could sense them hovering at the top of the staircase, listening. Difficult. I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the emotions churning inside me. Is that what you call defending my legal inheritance from a coordinated family conspiracy? Jessica's perfectly manicured nails tapped an impatient rhythm on the table. Always so dramatic, Brooke. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a family making sensible financial decisions. By falsely claiming our grandmother was mentally incompetent, I challenged. By accusing me of manipulating her, that goes well beyond sensible financial decisions. Alan adjusted his gold cufflinks, a nervous tick I had noticed over the years. Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you sign the paperwork we've prepared, agreeing to the sale of the property, and an equal 4-way split of the proceeds, minus development fees. You walk away with a nice check, and we all remain on good terms. And the hard way? I asked. Though I already knew. We proceed with challenging the will in court. My father said gravely. We have resources you don't, Brooke. Multiple attorneys, expert witnesses prepared to testify about Elizabeth's mental state. Documentation of your involvement in drafting the will. I almost laughed. Dad, I'm a successful attorney. I have resources, too. And more importantly, I have the truth on my side. Grandma was of sound mind. Multiple doctors confirmed it. And she wanted the farm preserved, not carved up for profit. The truth. Jessica scoffed. The truth is you've always been jealous of me, and you manipulated Grandma into giving you the most valuable family asset out of spite. That accusation was so backward it momentarily left me speechless. Jessica had been the favored child our entire lives. I had been the one desperately seeking scraps of approval and acknowledgement. Jessica? My mother said in a warning tone, glancing nervously at me. This was apparently not part of their rehearsed script. But Jessica was on a roll now. Her mask of civility was slipping, revealing the raw jealousy beneath. Don't Jessica me, Mom. We all know it's true. Little Brooke, always trying so hard with her straight A's and her scholarships and her fancy law degree. Always trying to prove she's special. Too. I never claimed to be special, I said quietly. I just wanted to be seen. Oh, we see you? Jessica sneered. We see exactly what you are. A calculating, manipulative woman who used her legal knowledge to swindle her own grandmother. I stood up then, unable to sit at that table for another moment. I'm not going to listen to these unfounded accusations. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she left me the farm. She knew I would honor her wishes and protect her legacy. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Jessica stood as well, her face flushed with anger. You really think you can fight all of us? Mom and Dad are on our side. Alan has connections with every judge in the county. You're alone, Brooke, just like you've always been. The truth of her words stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. I'd rather be alone than be part of this. This corrupt little scheme you've concocted. I reached for my purse, intending to leave before I said something truly unforgivable. But Jessica wasn't finished. You know what your problem is, Brooke? She said, her voice rising. You think you're better than us with your principles and your career, but the truth is you're pathetic. A 34-year-old spinster with nothing but her job and a run-down farm she visits on weekends to feel special. That's enough, Jessica, my father interjected. But there was no real authority in his voice. Jessica ignored him. She moved around the table toward me. Her eyes were bright with a lifetime of resentment I had never fully understood. You think Grandma loved you best, that she saw something in you no one else did. She pitied you, Brooke. Plain, serious, awkward Brooke, who couldn't make friends or find a husband. You don't know what you're talking about, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. Grandma and I understood each other. Grandma was losing her mind. Jessica practically shouted. She thought you were me half the time toward the end. That's probably why she left you the farm. She got confused about which granddaughter she was talking to. That blatant lie was the final straw. Stop it, Jessica. Just stop. Grandma was sharp until her final day, and you know it. This pathetic attempt to rewrite history won't work with me, and it won't work in court either. Something dangerous flashed in Jessica's eyes. Then she glanced at the crystal water pitcher in the center of the table, then back at me. You really think you're going to win this, don't you? She asked, her voice suddenly calm in a way that sent warning signals through my body. Before I could respond, Jessica grabbed the water pitcher. In one swift motion, she appended it over my head. The shock of the ice-cold water took my breath away. It drenched my hair, ran down my face, and soaked the front of my blouse and skirt. For a moment, the dining room was utterly silent. Except for the dripping of water onto the hardwood floor, Jessica's face was twisted with cruel triumph as she set the empty pitcher down with a thud. 10 minutes, she said, her voice cold and clear. You have 10 minutes to leave my house before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. I stood frozen, water dripping from my chin, unable to believe what had just happened. Then, to my further shock, my parents began to nod in agreement with Jessica. My father even gave a small, approving clap. It's for the best, Brooke. Sign the papers and move on, my mother added. We're still family. This doesn't have to change anything. From the staircase came the unmistakable sound of muffled laughter. Tyler and Sophia had witnessed the entire scene and found their mother's cruelty amusing. I could see the glow of a phone screen. One of them was recording this humiliation. In that moment of utter betrayal, something crystallized inside me. A lifetime of seeking approval from people who would never give it. A lifetime of playing by rules that were always rigged against me. A lifetime of accepting less than I deserved because I had been conditioned to believe that was all I was worth. No more. With deliberate calmness, I reached up and wiped the water from my face. Then, to everyone's surprise, including my own, I smiled. Jessica's smug expression faltered slightly, clearly thrown by my reaction. She had expected tears, shouting, a dramatic exit, not this eerie calm. I bent down and picked up my briefcase, which I had brought to dinner out of habit more than necessity. Setting it on the table, I clicked it open. What are you doing? Jessica demanded, uncertainty creeping into her voice. You said I have 10 minutes. I replied, my tone measured and controlled. That's plenty of time. From my briefcase, I withdrew a thick stack of legal documents, neatly bound and labeled. I placed them on the table, careful to avoid the puddle of water. Well then, I said, meeting Jessica's gaze directly, my voice dropping to an icy whisper that silenced the room. You've only got 10 minutes left to pray. Jessica's face went from triumphant to confused in an instant. Alan stepped forward, eyeing the stack of documents with growing concern. What is this supposed to be? Jessica demanded, trying to maintain her authoritative tone, but unable to hide the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I straightened my wet blouse as best I could and seated myself calmly back at the table. Please, everyone, sit down. Since we're having a family meeting about property and legal matters, I have a few things to contribute. Something in my tone, perhaps the absolute certainty in it, made them comply. One by one, my family members returned to their seats, staring at the documents I had placed before them. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating some interesting patterns in local real estate development, specifically developments managed by Thompson Enterprises. Alan's face paled visibly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about fraud, Alan. Systematic, documented fraud. I slid the top document toward him. This is a copy of a report I've compiled, detailing how your company has been pressuring elderly homeowners to sell their properties below market value by creating false code violations and threatening legal action they can't afford to fight. Jessica looked at her husband sharply. Alan, what is she talking about? Alan loosened his tie, a thin sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. I pulled out another document. Sworn statements from 15 elderly residents who were targeted by your company. Documentation of the falsified code violations. Paper trails of the shell companies you used to hide your involvement. My father leaned forward, his banker's instincts piqued despite himself. Is this true, Alan? Of course not. Alan snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. He reached for the documents, but I pulled them back. Don't worry, I have multiple copies. In fact, the originals were delivered to the district attorney's office yesterday morning. They were quite interested, especially given the pattern of targeting vulnerable seniors. Reminds them of another case they're working on. I paused meaningfully. My case? Jessica's face had lost all color. You're lying. You're just trying to distract us from the issue with Grandma's farm. About that, I continued, pulling out another set of documents. Did you really think I wouldn't have prepared for this? Grandma and I didn't just draft a will, Jessica. We created an ironclad trust with multiple layers of protection, specifically because she was worried about exactly this scenario. I spread out the trust documents, pointing to key clauses. Grandma's mental competency was evaluated by 3 separate physicians before signing these documents. The trust includes a no contest clause if any family member challenges its validity. They are automatically excluded from any benefits. And most importantly, I flipped to the last page. The farm was legally transferred to the trust 5 years before Grandma's death, while she was indisputably of sound mind. It's not even part of her estate anymore. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. This was clearly news to them. Furthermore, I continued relentlessly. I have here documentation showing that Jessica and Alan attempted to forge Grandma's signature on a deed transfer 2 years before she died. I slid forward a laboratory analysis report. The handwriting analysis is quite conclusive. That's fraud, attempted theft, and elder abuse. That's not possible, Jessica whispered. But her eyes told a different story. She knew exactly what I was referring to. My father, ever the pragmatist, was quickly reassessing the situation. Brooke, surely we can discuss this reasonably, as a family. Like you were being reasonable about accusing me of manipulating Grandma. I countered. Or like Jessica was being reasonable when she poured water over my head. I turned to Alan, who was frantically scanning the documents, his face growing more ashen by the second. There's more, Alan. I've been tracking your company's financial irregularities for months. The properties you've been buying through shell companies, the suspicious rezoning approvals, the unexplained payments to certain city officials. Alan stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. I need to call my attorney? By all means, I said, gesturing toward the door. Though you might want to know that the FBI has also received copies of my findings. They tend to take white-collar crime and corruption quite seriously. As Alan rushed from the room, phone already in hand, I turned back to my sister and parents. The shock on their faces was almost comical. But wait, I said, reaching for one final document. There's one more thing you should know. Jessica, now visibly shaking, glared at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. What more could you possibly have? I slid the last document toward her, enjoying the moment of perfect justice. Remember when you were having cash flow problems last year, Jessica? When Alan's business was under scrutiny and his accounts were temporarily frozen. Her eyes widened. She knew exactly what I was referring to. You took out a second mortgage on this house. I continued, a rather substantial one, at a very high interest rate, through a company called Monarch Financial Solutions. My father, the banker, winced at the mention of the interest rate. What Jessica and Alan don't know, I said, allowing myself a small smile. So that Monarch Financial Solutions is a subsidiary of a holding company that I created 3 years ago as an investment vehicle. In other words, I own your mortgage, Jessica, and according to my records, you've missed the last 3 payments. Jessica's jaw literally dropped. That's not possible. I assure you, it is. Check the paperwork yourself. And, according to the terms of that mortgage, which I'm certain Alan didn't read carefully enough, I have the right to foreclose. After 3 missed payments without further notice. I stood up, gathering my documents carefully. So, you see, Jessica, this house technically belongs to me now. I could give you 10 minutes to leave, but I'm not as cruel as you are. The silence in the dining room was absolute. Even the twins had stopped giggling on the staircase. You wouldn't? Jessica finally whispered. We'll have children. Unlike you, I replied. I don't take pleasure in making family members homeless. But I will protect what's rightfully mine, and I will hold all of you accountable for your actions. My parents, who had been stunned into silence, finally found their voices. Brooke, my father began, his authoritative tone replaced with something resembling fear. We didn't know about Alan's business practices, or the mortgage situation. We were just trying to do what was best for everyone with Grandma's farm. Be accusing me of manipulating her. By helping Jessica try to steal my inheritance. By applauding when she assaulted me at the dinner table. I shook my head. No, Dad. You weren't thinking about what was best for everyone. You were doing what you've always done, prioritizing Jessica over me. Truth and fairness be damned. From upstairs came the sound of a door slamming, followed by Alan's raised voice, as he presumably argued with his attorney on the phone. Jessica, her face crumpling, made one last attempt. You can't do this to us. We're family. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. Behind the perfect hair and designer clothes was a woman who had built her entire identity around being favored and special, a woman who had never developed the resilience that comes from having to earn your place in the world. Yes, Jessica, we're family. I agreed quietly. Which is why your betrayal cuts so deep. But family doesn't mean enabling harmful behavior or accepting mistreatment. It should mean love, support, and respect. None of which I've received from any of you tonight. Or for most of my life. I closed my briefcase with a definitive click and stood up straight, water still dripping from my clothes, but my dignity fully intact. I'll have my attorney contact you all tomorrow with next steps. And Jessica, I added, pausing at the dining room doorway. You might want to start packing. The next few minutes unfolded like a scene from a movie I had watched rather than lived. Alan rushed back into the dining room, his phone clutched in a white, knuckled grip, panic written across his face. She's right, he said to Jessica, his voice cracking. She's goddamn right about everything. Jessica's perfect composure finally shattered. What do you mean, everything? What have you done, Alan? Not now, he hissed, glancing at me nervously. We need to talk privately. But Jessica was beyond discretion now, her world collapsing around her. No, tell me right now. Is what she said about your business true? About the mortgage? About Grandma's farm? Some of it. There might be some irregularities in some of the business dealings, but it's complicated. Just standard industry practices that look bad when taken out of context. I couldn't help but interject. Fraud is not a standard industry practice, Alan. Neither is elder abuse or bribery. My father, ever practical even in crisis, tried to regain control of the situation. Rook, Surely we can reach some kind of understanding here. A family agreement that keeps all of this private. The implication was clear. They wanted to sweep everything under the rug, protect Alan from legal consequences, save Jessica from humiliation, and preserve their own comfortable narrative about our family. I'm afraid it's too late for that, I said firmly. The documentation has already been submitted to the proper authorities. This isn't just about me or Grandma's farm anymore. It's about all the elderly people Alan's company has victimized. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly stood and approached me. For a wild moment, I thought she might embrace me, offer some long, overdue maternal comfort. Instead, she adjusted her pearl necklace and said, "Brooke, darling, we may have been hasty about the farm situation. Of course, we respect your legal rights to the property. There's no need to pursue these other unfortunate matters." The transparent attempt to bargain, my silence about Alan's crimes in exchange for them backing off about the farm, was the final insult. "Mom?" I said quietly, "do you hear yourself? You're suggesting I overlook serious criminal activity to maintain family peace. That's not how integrity works." Jessica, meanwhile, had moved from shock to desperate anger. She lunged for the stack of documents I had shown them, but I had already returned them to my briefcase. "You're making this all up," she shouted, her carefully applied makeup now streaked with tears. "You've always been jealous of me, of my life, my family. This is just your pathetic revenge?" Alan grabbed her arm, trying to quiet her. "Jessica, stop. She has proof." My lawyer confirmed it. The look of betrayal Jessica gave her husband was almost enough to make me pity her. Almost. From the top of the stairs, Tyler called down, "Mom, Dad, what's happening?" "Nothing, honey," Jessica replied automatically, her social mask slipping back into place with practiced ease. "Just a family discussion. Stay upstairs with your sister." But the illusion of normalcy was shattered when the doorbell rang, its melodic chime incongruously cheerful in the tense atmosphere. Alan froze. "Who's that?" I checked my watch. "That would be the police." "The police?" Jessica echoed, her voice rising to a near shriek. "You called the police on your own family." "Actually, I called them before I arrived," I explained calmly. I had a reasonable suspicion that this dinner invitation, after years of minimal contact, might be a setup. I asked them to do a welfare check at precisely 8:30 if I didn't call to cancel. It's now 8:31. Alan's face contorted with rage. "You calculated all of this. Set us up." "No, Alan. I prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. There's a difference. If this had truly been a dinner to celebrate my professional success, the police would never have been involved." Jessica's housekeeper appeared at the dining room entrance, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Thompson, there are police officers at the door asking to speak with Miss Walker." I stepped forward. "That would be me. Please show them in." What followed was surreal. 2 officers entered the dining room, taking in the scene, me still damp from the water, the others in various states of distress. "Miss Walker, are you all right?" the female officer asked, her hand instinctively moving toward her belt. "I'm fine, Officer Chen," I said, having spoken with her earlier that day. "Just a family disagreement that got a bit wet." I gestured to my soaked clothing. "Did someone assault you, ma'am?" her partner asked, eyeing Jessica suspiciously. I considered the question carefully. I could press charges against Jessica for assault right then and there. The evidence was clear. I was standing in soaked clothes, and the twins had even recorded the incident. It would be a simple matter to have Jessica arrested on the spot. But that wasn't my goal. Justice, not vengeance. "No charges at this time," I said finally. "That I would appreciate an escort to my car, and I believe you might want to speak with Mr. Thompson about some business matters that have recently come to light." Alan went completely pale. "This is harassment. I'm calling my attorney again." "By all means," replied Officer Chen coolly. "You can do that down at the station. We have some questions about complaints filed by several elderly residents regarding Thompson Enterprises." While her partner began speaking with Alan, Officer Chen helped me gather my belongings. My parents, watching their carefully constructed family narrative crumble in real time, made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Brooke," my father said, his voice suddenly gentle, "you know we've always been proud of you, in our way. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time, seeing him not as the imposing father figure of my childhood, but as a flawed man who had made the grave mistake of playing favorites with his children. No, Dad, I said quietly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the inevitable result of decades of favoritism and enabling. Jessica believed she could treat me this way because you and Mom have always allowed it. You've always taken her side, excused her behavior, prioritized her wants over my needs. My mother stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes. That's not true, Brooke. We love both our daughters equally. The laugh that escaped me held no humor. Mom, tonight you literally applauded when Jessica poured water over my head and threatened to have me removed from her house. That's not love. That's not even basic respect. She had no response to that. As Officer Chen escorted me toward the front door, Jessica made one final, desperate appeal. Brooke, please, think about the children. What will happen to them if Alan goes to jail? If we lose the house? I paused, turning back to her. You should have thought about that before you decided to conspire against me, Jessica. Before Alan decided to build his business on fraud and exploitation. Actions have consequences. We can change, she pleaded, suddenly willing to promise anything. We'll back off about Grandma's farm. We'll make it right. For a moment, I almost wavered. Despite everything, these people were my family, the only one I had ever known. But then I remembered my grandmother's words. Don't let them diminish you, Brooke. It's too late for that, I said finally. You've shown me exactly who you are and what you think of me. I won't forget that lesson. With that, I walked out of Jessica's house. The house that technically now belonged to me. With my head held high, leaving behind the wreckage of a family that had never truly accepted me for who I was. In the police car, as Officer Chen radioed in, I watched through the window as more officers arrived. Alan was escorted out in handcuffs, while Jessica stood in the doorway, the twins clinging to her sides, her perfect life unraveling thread by thread. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a profound sense of closure. The scales had finally balanced. Justice, not vengeance. As we drove away, I took one last look at the house in the rearview mirror and let go of the last remnants of the desperate need for approval that had shaped so much of my life. I was finally free. 1 year later, I stood on the porch of my grandmother's farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the apple orchard in shades of gold and amber. A gentle September breeze carried the scent of ripening fruit and freshly cut grass, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt completely at peace. The past 12 months had been transformative in ways I never could have imagined that night at Jessica's dinner table. The journey from that moment of crisis to this quiet contentment had been neither straight nor easy, but every difficult step had led me here, to a place of genuine healing. After that fateful night, the legal proceedings unfolded with swift efficiency. Alan's business practices came under intense scrutiny, leading to multiple indictments for fraud, elder abuse, and bribery of public officials. He eventually accepted a plea deal that included restitution to his victims, hefty fines, and 3 years in federal prison. Jessica, faced with the collapse of her carefully constructed perfect life, initially lashed out, blaming everyone but herself for the situation. The mortgage on her mansion indeed fell into default, but contrary to what she feared, I didn't immediately foreclose. Instead, I offered her a choice. She could work with me to sell the property and use the proceeds to downsize to something more reasonable, or she could fight me in court and lose everything. For once in her life, Jessica made the practical choice. The mansion was sold, and she moved with the twins into a modest 3-bedroom home in a middle-class neighborhood. The last I heard, she had taken a job as a retail manager at an upscale department store, her first real employment in over 15 years. My parents, faced with the undeniable evidence of their favoritism and its consequences, reacted in different ways. My father retreated into work, unable to face the reality of his role in creating the family dynamic that had culminated in such a dramatic implosion. My mother, somewhat surprisingly, reached out repeatedly, seeking to rebuild some kind of relationship. At first, I ignored her calls and emails. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too complete. But eventually, after several months of therapy, I agreed to meet her for coffee. I failed you, she said simply, her eyes filling with tears as soon as we sat down. I failed you as a mother, and I have no excuse. It wasn't an immediate reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for that. But it was a beginning. We started seeing each other once a month, carefully rebuilding a relationship based on truth rather than illusion. She even volunteered occasionally at the community programs I had established at the farm, though we never discussed Jessica or my father during these visits. As for Grandma's farm, I had followed through on what I knew she would have wanted. The 20 acres remained undeveloped but far from unused. I converted the old barn into a legal aid center that provided free services to elderly residents facing housing issues or predatory development practices. The farmhouse became both my weekend retreat and a gathering place for a support group I had helped establish for people dealing with family estrangement and toxic relationships. The apple orchard was now a community garden where local schools brought children for educational programs. Every Saturday, volunteers from town came to tend the vegetables and flowers, creating a vibrant community space from what might have become yet another soulless luxury housing development. My professional life had also transformed. After the case against Alan's company made headlines, my expertise in combating elder exploitation became highly sought after. I left my firm to establish my own practice, focused exclusively on protecting seniors from predatory business practices. We were now a team of 5 attorneys and 3 paralegals, with a waiting list of clients. More important than these external changes, though, was the internal transformation I had undergone. The night Jessica poured water over my head had been humiliating and painful, but it had also been clarifying. It had stripped away the last of my illusions about my family and freed me from the exhausting pursuit of an approval I would never receive. In therapy, I had come to understand that my lifelong quest for family recognition had shaped nearly every aspect of my life. My career choice, my work ethic, even my personal relationships had all been influenced by the deep-seated belief that I needed to prove my worth. Breaking free from that pattern had been the most difficult and rewarding work of my life. I had begun dating again, this time choosing partners based on genuine connection rather than how they might look to my family. I had reconnected with old friends and made new ones, who appreciated me for exactly who I was. I had even adopted a dog, something I had always wanted, but had put off because my apartment felt too temporary, my life too unsettled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land my grandmother had entrusted to me, I thought about how she would feel about all that had happened. The betrayal would have broken her heart. But I like to think she would be proud of how I had responded to it. Not with hatred or endless bitterness, but by creating something positive from the ashes of what had been destroyed. "You were right, Grandma," I whispered to the evening breeze. I did have more strength than I knew. The next morning, I hosted the monthly community breakfast at the farm. Nearly 50 people gathered at long tables set up in the orchard, sharing food and conversation. Some were clients from the legal aid center, others volunteers from the garden, still others from the support group. Together, they formed the chosen family I had built for myself out of the wreckage of the one I was born into. As I refilled coffee cups and chatted with guests, a new visitor approached. She introduced herself as a teacher from the local high school, interested in bringing her students to learn about sustainable agriculture. "This place is amazing," she said, looking around at the thriving community space. "How did you come up with the idea to use it this way?" I considered telling her the whole story. The family betrayal, the water incident, the legal battle that followed. But those details, while part of my journey, weren't what defined this place or me anymore. Someone very wise once told me that our greatest wounds can become our greatest gifts. I said instead, this farm was meant to be preserved not just as land, but as a legacy of caring for others. That's what I'm trying to do here. Later, as the gathering wound down and people began to leave, I found myself alone for a moment, beside the ancient oak tree where my grandmother and I had spent so many hours talking when I was young. The journey from that humiliating moment at Jessica's dinner table to this peaceful morning had been transformative. I had learned that family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, respect, and mutual support. I had discovered that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but necessary. And most importantly, I had found that sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the moment of clarity that comes when illusions are washed away, leaving only the truth behind. The water Jessica poured over my head that night hadn't diminished me. It had baptized me into a new life, one built on authenticity rather than approval seeking, on boundaries rather than martyrdom, on self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. That night, drenched and humiliated at my sister's table, I had thought my world was ending. Instead, it had been just beginning. As I picked up the last of the breakfast dishes, I smiled to myself. Life would always have its challenges, but I would never again allow anyone to make me feel smaller than I was or less deserving of respect and dignity. That confidence was worth every painful step of the journey. For those of you watching who have ever felt diminished by the people who should have lifted you up, who have struggled to be seen and valued by your own family, know this: your worth is not determined by their ability to recognize it. Your strength may be discovered precisely in those moments when you feel most broken. And sometimes the family that truly nurtures you is the one you build for yourself after the one you were born into has failed. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of transformation. Share your own experiences in the comments below. And let me know, was there ever a moment when something that seemed like humiliation became your turning point toward a better life? Remember, sometimes our most painful moments contain the seeds of our greatest growth. Until next time, be kind to yourselves and never let anyone dim your light.